Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books and more books because I read a lot. So today I've got 7 books to tell you about. And before I get started with those, I'd like to mention that the Carol Shields Prize shortlist was just announced yesterday, so I will include a link below. I had started reading one of the books that are on that shortlist, When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar, and it's really good so far. I'm not too far into it, but I'm looking forward to reading more. And without any further ado, on to the books that I finished recently. I'm going to start with one that connects with 2 different readathons that are happening right now on BookTube. Trans Girl April and Picture This, which is a picture book readathon for adults to read children's picture books. The book I'm talking about is For Laika. It's by Cheng Thom with illustrations by Ching. Thom is a Chinese-Canadian, a trans woman, and Ching is queer also, uses they, them pronouns. An interesting thing about For Laika is that it is not specifically trans, and I think that's great. There's probably been a lot of pressure on trans creators to have trans content in the books that they write. But trans people are multifaceted, as we all are, and so this book is about a real dog, Laika, who was the first creature to circle the Earth in space. The picture book is an unusual combination of historical fact of space exploration, mythology about stars, and there are dogs in this book who talk to each other and wonder about their parents and what happens after you die. And there's also an ethical question that's brought to the fore about using animals in scientific experiments. So lots of different things. And the queer aesthetic is definitely there. There's a rainbow bridge, not necessarily queer because of the association with where animals go after they die. Laika, the central character, is very brave, and I like the way that the art has a naive quality to it. Looks like a child might have drawn some of the elements, and it's also quite decorative. There's a certain amount of joy and hopefulness, even though the story itself is tragic. This dog died for the sake of finding out more about space exploration. So, all in all, a very interesting picture book. Next up is a YA graphic novel, a superhero transgender story from DC Comics. It's by Jadzia Axelrod, and the art is by Jess Taylor. Jadzia is a trans woman. Jess Taylor uses they, them pronouns. The story is so full of joy. It is the story of Taylor, who is galaxy crowned. She and several other people from her planet escaped when her planet was attacked. And for 6 years, they have been hiding on Earth with Taylor pretending to be a human boy and the others pretending to be humans as well, members of the family, and one is pretending to be a dog. That's Argus, who's a great character, looks like a corgi. And of course it's not easy for Taylor to always be pretending to be something that she is not, pretending to be a boy. And then a new girl comes to town from the big metropolis called Metropolis. That's where Superman lives. And Taylor just can't hide anymore. This queer love story is such a celebration. This high school aspect of not being able to hide anymore, and not all of your old friends being able to understand, rings really true as a realistic story in spite of it being science fiction. And the colors, Jess Taylor's bright colors are just fantastic. No blacks, lots of vivid, vivid color.
And somehow I managed to leave out the title, which is Galaxy, the Prettiest Star.
April is Poetry Month, and I listened to a queer collection of poetry by Farzana Doctor. This is her first poetry collection. She's written a number of novels, most recently one called Seven, which is about the religious practice of Katna. It's a kind of genital female mutilation practiced within a certain sect. And in this collection of poetry, some of the poems touch on that as well. The title is You Still Look the Same, and the poems are very much everyday life in midlife by this queer South Asian Muslim Canadian writer. So some of the poems in the audiobook edition are read by Ulka Simone Mohanty, and some are read by the author, which gives a nice sound diversity. These next 4 books that I'm going to tell you about are all related to textiles in some way. I was drawn to them because I was just on a knitting retreat. If you haven't heard, I met up with my sister. We did a lot of knitting, and we also listened to audiobooks together. Before I tell you about the audiobooks, one of these books is a realistic YA novella, and the other one is a great big chunky YA fantasy. I'll start with Needle by Patrice Lawrence, who is a Black British author. And this is a story of a girl in foster care who has anger management issues. She has been knitting since she was a small girl. That's how she keeps herself calm. And she has been knitting a special blanket for her little sister, who is in a separate home. Charlene hasn't been able to see her for a long time, but she's knitting her this special blanket. And when that knitting project is destroyed, things do not go well for poor Charlene. I read this in the airplane on my way back from Victoria, and I cried. Tearjerker, realistic, really good, quick read. That's Needle by Patrice Lawrence. This next one is called Unraveller. It's by Frances Hardinge, another British writer. And I'm sorry I can't show you how gorgeous this book is because I've already returned it to the library. But I do have some pictures of what it looks like on the inside. The book design is just great with decorative element, the start of each chapter, for example. So it's a fantasy. I don't read a lot of fantasy now. It feels like too often they're too much the same as other fantasy stories that I've read. But Frances Hardinge never disappoints me. She always comes up with something really original. And in Unraveller's world, people get cursed. And how these curses come about is really interesting in the book. And also the main character can unravel curses. So that's where the title comes from. He comes from a family of weavers, and when he first gained the ability to unravel curses, he also was unraveling anything that was woven. So he ended up getting banished from his village and could only wear felted clothes. Some of the intriguing issues that Hardinge deals with in this novel include post-traumatic stress disorder and how people in this book, when their curse is dissolved, they're still dealing with the trauma of having been turned into a table or a bird, or something like that, and its after effects. And there are little ties to historical fact, like the Luddites and destroying mechanical looms so that hand weavers wouldn't lose their livelihood, and mythology like the Children of Lear and the poem The Goblin Market, that sort of thing. Just a fully realized world with spiders that are kind of like monks. Yeah, so interesting. And the final two books are both nonfiction, starting with a memoir. It's People April. Let's read about people. The memoir is by Peggy Ornstein. It's called Unraveling, with a really long subtitle. What I Learned About Life from Shearing Sheep, Dyeing Wool, and Making the World's Ugliest Sweater. So she tells the story about how during the pandemic, she really needed to do something. She needed a project, and she decided she was going to learn how to shear a sheep, spin that wool, dye it, and make herself a sweater, just like the subtitle says. And it was also a way of dealing with grief and other major changes going on in her life. And all told in a really engaging way in this audiobook, which she reads herself. That sweater, by the way, I found a picture of it online. It is not ugly at all. I love it. My sister and I both really enjoyed this. And the last audiobook that I've got to tell you about is The Fabric of Civilization, How Textiles Made the World. It's by Virginia Postrel. And she goes all the way back to when humans first learned how to make string, and what an important technological development that was for tool making and for hunting food, making nets, for example, and for clothing. And how things like international trade routes and double entry bookkeeping and mathematics and the binary system in computing comes from weaving, and our modern banking system. All of these things can be traced back to textiles. It's a book that's full of fun facts for those of you who like learning new things. And yeah, I just thought it was great. And Simone liked it too. So that's all that I have finished lately. I've got a bunch more on the go. And this just came in for me at the library. Third person, a huge fat memoir in graphic novel format. It's by Emma Grove, who's trans. So Trans Girl April continues. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and what you're reading now. I'm especially interested in what you've got going for Trans Girl April if you are participating. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. So Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.